name when they come in, which should be Andy.
I like the name.
That's it. We're live, folks. It's September the 2nd, 2022. And this show was originally going to be just all about DIMO. And we have Andy and Yev coming on from DIMO. But Helium Foundation, or Helium, dropped this HIP 70 giant message on us sometime early this week. And so we're going to do a little bit of DIMO stuff, or DIMO for kind of most of the hour, and then jump in with, or get on the HIP 70 stuff. So really exciting stuff. I think it's almost all super positive news. But Dave, let's start with the numbers. Everybody wants to know what happened with Helium last week. What's the data show?
Well, so I've had a look at the data for last week and also compiled the monthly reports to show what's happened sort of as a trend over the month. And rather boringly again, we've hit a period of stability after the chain halt. The number of beacons, the number of witnesses have been really stable for the last sort of 20 days really since the chain halt. I think one of the more interesting things that I've looked at this week is I had a look at some of the data usage because obviously nobody uses the network. So I had a look at some of the data usage and which hotspots around the world are sort of consuming that data and passing it on. And I did some stuff on Twitter. There's a download on Twitter if you go to Helium Analytics Twitter page. You'll see that there's a download in there where you can download all the data usage for August until I think the 28th of August, something like that. And you can cut it by country and by city, so you can see the top cities in the world where data transfer is occurring. You can look at it by country and you can split it down, which is a job that you can do on the DYETL. But it's painful because every time you change your city, you have to wait for 2 minutes for it to reload. But with the spreadsheet that I've got linked, you can just have a look at the overview. But there's like 30,000 cities in the world that have had packet transfer during August. So
which city is winning? I'm an American. I want to know about winners.
Actually, the most packets transferred were in a city in the Netherlands called Hegold or something. But when I looked into it, I think Jeremy might want to jump on that. It's 250,000 packets on 5 hotspots for 2 days. So it kind of looks like a little bit of gaming.
No,
but yeah,
that's impossible.
You can cut it by country, and obviously the US has got the most usage from DCs at the moment. I haven't got my other screen up to have a look, but yeah, the US has got like the top 6 or 7 cities for data transfer at the moment.
All right,
but
somebody
somebody asked me about Beirut, so I had a look at Beirut, and I think Beirut's only the 4th highest data usage in Lebanon, so you can sort of have a look at the spreadsheet and sort of see what's happening with data packet transfer. It's something that I'm going to continue to develop and hopefully get something up on the website, so you can use the drop downs and just probe into where the data is being used. So it's kind of encouraging to see that there are people using the network, and we will be able to see it growing if we monitor it. So
yeah. Exciting stuff. Yeah. Dig it, dude. Thanks. It's always, I mean, it's nice to start these things with the numbers, because there's an awful lot of like, oh, this thing's broken, or it's, they keep making changes and it'll never work. And it's nice to see like, well, last week it did work, and there's these like pieces of progression, and every week there's progression. Sometimes it's not what we want.
Yeah. So one thing people always moan about is, oh, rewards are down today. Again, for the last like 15 days, I think we've been at around 60,000 HNT for hotspots every day. Which is above 50,000, which is the average. And yesterday, when I did the monthly data, you look at it over the month, and the average per day for the month of August was like 49,500, which is almost bang on where it needs to be to average out. So you can see on the graph the ups and downs, but on average, the system does what it's supposed to do, and it corrects itself and aims for that target. So yeah, it's working.
Rad.
I'd like to see more hotspots beaconing. I'd like to see more hotspots witnessing.
I think that's coming, if I'm understanding this right. So that's good. Okay, so we got a couple other folks on here. I know that I've been listening to the audio pieces of these, and I always forget to introduce everyone. So Dave from Helium Analytics just spoke. We also have Daniel from Hotspotty on here. I know, Daniel, I'm seeing a bunch of questions in the comments about when mobile analytics are coming. I'd love to hear about that. We got Andy from DIMO, which the show was originally all about DIMO, and then HIP 70 dropped, and we're like, okay, well, we'll just see how HIP 70 fits into DIMO or DIMO fits into HIP 70. And then we've got Joey from Helium Foundation on here. So a full stack today. Andy, let's start with you. Like, you're a user of the Helium network. I know at the very beginning it was planned to really use the hell out of it with IoT, but catch me up to speed. What's going on with DIMO?
I was looking at some cool designs for a project that we've been working on that we lovingly have named ARC, because it's just the words in card, or the letters in car scrambled up. And it's the first helium mapping device that we're going to offer that's compatible directly with DIMO devices, both the current generation and future generations. And it looks like we're going to be able to get a couple of those demo units out in the next couple of months. It's something that like we really wanted to prioritize early on, but once we started adding a bunch of cars and getting into the practical realities of like scaling up the core network, it fell by the wayside. And now we're like really getting stoked about it again, and have a lot of other nice pieces in place to start using the Helium network a lot more.
Awesome. That's super good. And let's see, for folks who've never seen DIMO before, the super short version is a device you stick in your car. It transmits your car data and then allows you to monetize that if you want, or to see it if you want. Like there's more to it than that, but that's kind of the short version. As
not just the device, as a matter of fact. Most of the cars that are connected today are just software only. You can log in if you have a Tesla or other connected vehicle with an existing subscription, and use it that way.
Rad. Okay, so you're using the network, and I think one of the comments I saw was like, "Oh, how are you so positive? Everything's breaking every time." And kind of front and center here is we've got a user of the network, and it doesn't sound to me like you're planning on not using it. Is that? I mean, I'm not going to make you commit to anything, but are you like, look, oh man, I'm out of here?
I've seen enough in the tech world where to realize that nothing is ever a straight line, and there's often things that people get very negative about, who don't really understand the kind of core ideas of what's happening with something like Helium and a lot of like just decentralized IoT projects in general. And so our approach is we just kind of keep our heads down and build stuff. And if don't spend as much time in the like Twitter flame wars about all of the negativity around one project or another. And we're just as excited about Helium as we've ever been.
Right on. And we've got a user on the chat. Mighty Keenan has been using it for months. Keenan, how did you get DIMO on your car? Oh, probably because you have a Tesla. Sorry.
Nice. Yeah. It's a great experience for Tesla owners, just because those cars have really good connectivity out of the box. And one thing that we're going to start to do is add more accessories that are compatible with that basically add functionality to cars. So my Toyota RAV4, for example, like I have at this point like 7 aftermarket electronic devices in it, between radar detectors, the Comet AI I'm using, the DIMO device, backup batteries, like all this stuff we're going to kind of start to add on. And a big part of that is like putting LoRa connectivity as a backup, and also to enable helium mapping for cars, which is like a pretty awesome thing to do.
Radical. I'm going to shift a little bit, and we're going to come back to you, because I know Yev is coming on in a couple minutes, your CTO. Dave will drop off. Dave, before you kind of get booted here, is there any kind of last comments, concerns, complaints, stuff that you have? You usually have a pretty good mind for what's going on.
No, I'm having some discussions in the HIP 70 channel at the moment to make sure that we preserve our precious data.
Discussions, huh?
Yeah.
Someone said you're fighting with Capcom. Okay, so it's good to see. Good to see that. And I think that's,
I haven't been in the Helium Discord this week. Has anything interesting happened there in the last couple of days? Anybody? Yeah.
Nothing like any other week.
Yeah.
Just normal stuff.
Normal stuff. Let's drop down.
We're fighting over whose blockchain is best at the moment.
Okay.
Oh, great. Perfect. That's always an awesome conversation to drop into.
Yeah. Joey, I'm going to come to you in a second. Daniel, Joey, give me some kind of Helium Foundation perspective here. What are you guys thinking? You guys dropped it this week. Must have been super exciting to be like, oh, finally we can talk about this. Yeah, what's going on in your world?
Yeah, definitely a lot of the finally we can talk about this. We've had this open conversation for a really long time of doing off-chain oracles for a lot of the key components of the Helium infrastructure. And a big part of that discussion is like, well, we're going to move all of this to a different L1. And so there's always a lot of speculation externally, in the community of like, well, what L1 are they going to choose? So finally, we get to tear the Band-Aid off and say like, all right, we have the core devs have all sort of rallied around Solana as the main L1 that we're going to move everything from a transaction standpoint to. And so the way that this is going to work is there's going to be these infrastructure pieces that do all of this reporting into the L1. Our migration path is hopefully looking to be really smooth. So like your existing wallet, we're just going to do like a ledger import into the Solana chain. So like you just use the Solana chain instead of the Helium chain. We're going to try and obviously make sure all of this stuff is just super smooth for folks. The Helium project has always sort of held user experience to like a high regard, down to the way that you set up a Helium gateway. You just plug it in and it's working. So all of that stuff super important. God, there's so many pieces of this. Huge, so one of the things I'm spending a good bit of time on right now is just making sure our game plan for data transfer and the way that the LoRaWAN infrastructure carries over.
Mm-hmm.
But it turns out when you take away a lot of the complexities that was sort of bundled up in the blockchain, the way the packets get purchased, the offer mechanism, all of that stuff, router, all of that goes away. And we get to build a much more simplified infrastructure, what we're calling a packet router. So all of your hotspots get to blast everything at a load balancer that handles it out to this packet router. And then we can send that out to any LNS. And so the LNS is the LoRaWAN. It's the
LoRaWAN network server. You got it, dog.
Yeah, brain fart. LoRaWAN network server. I probably said it at some point, and this is in the link. But that's like the console part that you're familiar with today, right? So you go console.helium.com, manage your devices. This opens up a huge opportunity. There's a ton of third-party infrastructure around this already in the ecosystem, and it's much more like feature complete. So looking at platforms like Chirp already handles LoRaWAN class A, B, and C. So class B is basically like a class A device, but it'll let you receive network time to your device. So it's kind of cool for certain applications. And then it uses that network time to sort of do timed uplinks. So if you need something that's sort of in sync with the network, it can do that. And then class C is a really big one that a lot of folks, as they sort of dive into LoRaWAN, start to discover they need. So early on, I wanted to build a smart chicken coop door. And the idea was like, I should just be able to press this button. And it's like still sitting behind me in the pile. But I should be able to press this button on my phone and the door should open. And then I should be able to press the button again and the door should close. But that's actually a fairly difficult thing to build on a Class A LoRaWAN system because you can only send those commands after the chicken coop has sort of like checked in and phoned home. You get these windows that open up. So what Class C enables is it just listens all of the time for commands from the LoRaWAN gateway. So when I press that button, it just immediately is good to go. So you can imagine that sort of all sorts of cool applications where you need a device that's just always listening. The reason we don't normally do that is because it's like power trade-off, right? That radio is always working.
And that, Andy, is that going to be something that you guys end up using the Class C side for the vehicles to transmit into them or push into them, or no?
So the one thing that we've learned is that having more ways to connect is never a bad thing, especially when you're talking about a $70,000 piece of electronics that might have 3 or 4 different network connectivity options on it. And as we're going through the process of working with hardware manufacturers and designing next generation devices, a lot of them, like something like LoRa wasn't even on their radar a couple of years ago, and now because of helium, they're like, oh shit, this is an option. Like people actually, it takes multiple years for this stuff to make its way into like real production grade hardware, and more than that when you're talking about automotive grade stuff. And so,
Dang.
yeah, of course.
Now you said something, and Daniel, I'm coming to you because I see you like nodding your head and you're like, oh yeah, this is awesome. But I want to hit on this thing, Andy, you just said, is that because of helium, a lot of these folks are now saying, okay, maybe this thing is legit, or they just didn't know about it before and helium brought it up to the surface. I see a lot of questions about like, oh, helium is whatever, getting broken or dying or etc. But I think in reality, what I'm seeing on my side when I'm talking to device manufacturers is that was the conversation 8 months ago. It was like, what's helium? It's a toy. It's never going to work, da da da. And now they're like, holy smokes, I gotta build for this thing, and it is legit, and it's a worldwide network, and it's bigger than anything I've seen. It's pretty cool to see that from my perspective, and Andy from yours as well.
It's not like I said, it's never a straight line, and there's something that very substantial that has happened as far as people's awareness of it and what it can add, and then it takes a couple of years for it to like the creative process to work and it to actually make its way in, especially in the hardware environment that we're in right now.
Yeah, dig it. All right, Daniel, what do you got with Hotspotty? When are we going to see mobile analytics? Like, what's going on in your world?
Okay, first of all, I want to say here like a DIMO shirt.
You got your DIMO shirt on. Holla!
Oh, yeah. I gotta say the DIMO is one of the projects that keeps me like most excited on the DIY infrastructure, just like the potential. But anyway, I'm really excited about that. When Helium released the HIP 17, I didn't sleep a lot that night. I think a couple nights ago.
Yeah.
It was a lot of like, this is super cool. Fuck my life. Now I need to figure this thing out. Oh, but this is super nice because you're gonna enable this thing, but then I have to do this thing. So there's a lot of trade-offs. But overall, I think it's a very positive thing for the Helium network, and it's gonna enable a lot of new cool things. And at Hotspot, we're gonna go along. We're gonna probably become a Web3 now instead of 2.5, right? There's a lot of things that's gonna enable things from like being able to sign transactions from the wallet through inside Hotspot, etc. One thing that I'm with Dave in this, I think that's our main concern, is that by taking off the ETL, people are going to lose access to the raw data of Helium, right? Of the actually what's happening in the network. And that I think that's something that I hope that Nova is going to be very careful before disabling that information from people to have. Like, for example, Hotspot need that data to do a lot of the data processing. Dave need that data for the Helium analytics. And just taking a little bit of the historical work that Helium has done doesn't really help the community as much. So I'm really hoping that that's not the case this time. Just as one example, I know that the Helium team has been working really hard with the mobile token, but up to now, there's no way, answering like a lot of people's questions, there is no way right now for anyone to know which hotspot is mining X amount of mobile tokens. Yep. The only thing we can do is know how many mobile tokens are airdropped inside a wallet, which we already have that inside Hotspotty. Also on agentscan.io, you can also see that. Our infrastructure is basically ready to be able to for people to like add commission reports in mobile tokens and everything else. But basically we don't have access to that information. It's not on the ETL. So I can imagine it's going to be similar to this new Solana move. Helium is going to be like more centralized, but I hope that together with like the people who are interested in the Helium Foundation and Joey, we can come up with something very interesting that can help everybody. But overall, I'm very excited by the Solana push. I think it's going to be really exciting. I'm a big Solana fan as well. So overall, it's going to be pretty cool.
Right on.
But scary.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is I saw this Chirp stack thing coming through, and I think we're going to hear that name a lot. And I was like, man, I'm going to learn how to use this like right now and spin up my own little Chirp stack LNS and figure it out before kind of Helium makes a transition, because they're so big, they're not going to do it this week, and I think I can probably do it by next week. But just like learning all this new stuff and figuring it out, it's really, really exciting. Speaking of new stuff and technology crap, we got Yev on from DIMO. He just came in. I just booted Dave out. Yev, welcome to the State of the Network. Super psyched to have you on, man.
Thanks for having me. Good to see everybody. A lot of familiar faces here.
Yeah, and you're the CTO for DIMO, so tell me what's going on through your mind as you're seeing this HIP 70 thing launch, and what are the kind of good, bad, ugly, whatever.
Yeah. Well, in some ways it's good, and in some ways I think it's just a directional change, right? Scaling blockchains is very difficult, and Helium has very large ambitions, and I think a lot of things it can accomplish. And you can't really avoid, the scaling problem of a blockchain at the end of the day. And I do think that having, moving to more of a trusted parties approach with multiple oracles and being able to interoperate with other things on Solana is actually going to be overall a good thing. As
Hang on
time
one
goes
second.
on.
You said oracles, and I know when I read HIP 50, that was the first word that I saw. I was like, God, what is an oracle? So I looked it up, but walk me through it from your kind of more expert perspective.
Yeah. So, well, we call them oracles, we call them L2s, but generally speaking, I think it's infrastructure that you need to integrate with the blockchain. That's not the blockchain itself, right? And as we've seen, to scale blockchains, you really need to move some computation off chain. So, in my mind, it's the Web2 services to make the Web3 portion work. Is probably
Okay.
the simplest way to put it.
So, and I guess the way that I think of it, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that there's the blockchain itself, and then it's got to talk to some other thing, other information source out there, wherever that is. And that is, it sounds way cooler when you say Oracle, but it's talking to something that is not on the chain. Is that
Exactly.
close? Okay,
Yep.
cool.
So yeah, so something that's not on the chain and something that is, helping you solve some computation that you can't necessarily do on chain as well. Obviously, the tricky part there becomes with who's running the Oracle, but I believe with the current plan, the Oracle will be run by the original founding team initially, and they do have plans to let anyone else run that same stack as well. So I'm hoping to be running, be part of the hosting set of companies here in probably a year or so.
Yeah, the Oracle runners. Maybe I should buy oraclerunners.com. Someone's going to get to that before me because I won't get to the end of the show. Cool. All right. So that's kind of a little bit about the interaction with Helium. But why don't you guys walk me through what's new with DIMO? I know the last time we talked, Andy, I think we did a State of the Network, but we did an interview a while ago. It was still kind of pretty new, but it looks like from following you on social media and the usual channels that you guys are making a lot of progress.
Yeah, we certainly have been adding a bunch of cars to the network, and one of the things that we've really focused on is getting people like really stable and putting the project in a place where we feel like it can take a massive leap forward in terms of number of vehicles supported, and a lot of that is driven by hardware shipments, bringing cars online that weren't online before, and then of course we've started to add more things for people to do once they connect their car, which is going to ultimately drive demand for the network and people's data and provide them with better services to use. So like we have a couple of cool announcements on that coming out in the next few months, and some things that we're already like testing out with small groups of users that are going to be pretty cool. And our approach initially when we started the year was, let's get as many people to use this as possible. And then once a few thousand people showed up, we were like, actually, like that might be good for now. We don't need to go all out in terms of having 1 million people on this thing right away. And so it's been a pretty awesome year of shipping a ton of stuff, and I think we really have like a pretty cool line of sight towards here's what we can do in the next year now, and really set this thing up to grow quite large.
Dig it. Hey, I'm seeing in the chat from the people guys, and I gotta say, Daniel, if you're wearing your DIMO shirt, I think I got my people shirt on. Is there, and I'm interested too, is there this hardware kind of hosting economy? Are people buying a ton of DIMO units and then acting as host and splitting earnings? Are you guys seeing that happen? The same thing we've seen.
And I thought we really wanted to, so we had a couple of different like approaches on that initially. Some people showed up like when we announced the pre-sale and basically wanted to buy all of the units that we had, and we, for a lot of reasons, decided to like be pretty intentional around restricting people to only ordering 2, because we want users to be like it's a little different than the Helium hosting environment for a number of reasons when you're talking about like putting a device in somebody's car. And so we're certainly interested in supporting that in the future. And we have, we think it's actually going to probably focus around fleets, which is a big thing, like fleets of cars, not fleets in the IoT device management world sense.
Yep.
And so we're preparing to have the hardware supply to be able to support that. And that's something that I think we'll really be able to like get into and open up by the end of the year. And for now, like we just have this super long wait list of people that want to buy the hardware, and we want to make sure that like every individual person who wants to can get one, and then people who want to do deployments of 100 or 200, they'll be able to do that as well.
Right on. Super cool. It looks like I see someone from the DIMO team is pretty active in the chat, answering a lot of the questions that come through. So that's always good. You guys are coming kind of full court on this, full court press.
I got to be honest though, that was just me. Yeah, okay. I saw some questions coming in, so I pulled up the chat and was doing. We're not that advanced. Yeah. We don't have a PR team or anything,
Hey, you'd said something about growing really quickly, and I saw Daniel kind of smile about it. And I think it's this really interesting thing is that a lot of these blockchain-related projects have so many people so excited to use them, whether it's Helium and Hotspotty or it's DIMO and vehicles, that one of the problems is how do you grow slow enough, right? That in normal business, it's like how do we accelerate growth? But a lot of times it looks like in these kind of blockchain and meat space projects, it's like, whoa, we gotta slow down so we can handle this. Daniel,
it's kind of an interesting dynamic. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Daniel. Yeah.
No, I'm just saying. Yeah, it's funny how growth is hard, but it needs to be steady, right? If everything happens out of like 1 month, everything breaks. It's like when we launched Hotspotty on August, November was the peak of the bull market. I remember spending a lot of time on infrastructure. Like we have so much data running, processing the ETL data. And we had like 4,000 concurrent users, like soaking up all the resources. It was interesting time. Things right now is a little bit more calm, and it's a better time to build and be prepared for the demand that's going to happen in like the next bull run as well.
Yeah, Yev, how are you looking at that? Because that's something that you're going to definitely have to deal with. Is you got your, I don't know what the concurrent users is now, but it's going to grow.
Yeah, for us, concurrent users is actually concurrent users plus concurrent devices. But yeah, I mean, in terms of scaling, it's something that I feel like we have a good handle on. I've in my experience, I've seen a 50 million car fleet at OnStar. We had a million car fleet that we went from zero and at the last place I was at with Volkswagen. So I'm as long as you build on scalable infrastructure, and Andy's been quite helpful in what he just said, which is not trying to grow too fast, which gives me more time to pre-set up the infrastructure to scale when we need it.
Yeah, it's super cool to see this stuff. Let's see, Joey, when like going back to you, if we think about on the Helium Foundation side, what are you guys thinking as far as like how fast, I don't know, like this HIP70 thing rolls out, and then how it affects users like DIMO or whoever else is using it? Kind of walk me through what your thinking is on, I don't know, not supporting users because it's not really your problem, but you got to be thinking about it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely look at users as everyone that's mining to like straight up using the network. Like,
yep.
You got to keep everybody happy. Yeah, so like timelines, your first question there. A lot of this work is sort of in progress, so we don't like to put votes up until there's an implementation together. So when we put the vote up, or when we see the vote go up for HIP70, like that is going to be alongside, like, this is how this thing is going to work. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, some of the work is happening. Some of the work is going to take longer. So we'll sort of see this stretch out for probably a couple of quarters, but we'll also sort of see some like really immediate transition stuff, I think. I can't.
There's gonna be some buttons pushed.
I'm not gonna like. Yeah, there'll be some buttons pushed. The only reason I'm not saying exactly which things is like all of this. There's a lot of unknowns, right, in any of this. So we just have to be a little careful around when we're saying stuff is ready, because then people jump all over it.
It's in the can. Come on, you know it.
Yeah,
it's your trademark.
Right? Yeah, I've learned my lessons. So, or maybe I haven't.
Okay, so with that, then I'm gonna go back to Andy. Is how are you guys thinking of the future of maybe like the next 3 quarters, right? Not the next 3 weeks or 3 months, but almost the next year. Is like how does that roll out, and how are you guys gonna match what Helium is doing, or is there some alternative or better way?
I'll kick that over to Yev. I feel like Yev has a much better answer for that than I will.
You might have to ask again because I started thinking about something else.
I'll jump in and say, like, from a usage standpoint, which is kind of where DIMO is going to be playing with this, like the devices are still going to work, the network's still going to work. The way you interface with it is going to change a little bit, but it's still LoRaWAN. So if DIMO's building LoRaWAN stuff, then they're rock solid.
Yeah,
one question.
And, we do have an add-on that we'll be adding to our current devices, and our future devices will come with.
I teased that a little bit before you jumped on.
Yeah, this art thing. I'm curious to learn more.
Let's
about.
go into this tease. Walk me through it.
I gotta bow out, but it's good to see you both and the rest of the crew. I always appreciate the time.
Right on, dog.
I'll tag in Paul.
Yeah.
Quick question: are you guys still planning to be on Polygon?
For now.
Moving to Solana too.
Just come to Solana. We have cookies. I'm just kidding.
So one thing that I do think we could talk about is like, what does it look like to run something like DIMO on multiple different chains? And it's certainly something that we've discussed as a group. And I think there's a non-zero chance that something like that could end up happening with Helium in the future, or like what is it even? I don't know. Yev, I know has some thoughts on what it would look like to have multiple different DIMO clients that run. I mean, certainly Polygon is already in L2 for Ethereum, so it's somewhat similar setup.
Yeah, you guys can hear me okay still, right?
Yep, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we picked Polygon just because it is very close to the Ethereum ecosystem, which is the largest today. But we do want to support users on every chain, and our goal is to run on every chain eventually, and really leave it up to the user where they want their vehicle identity to live, and where they want their ownership and data access to live. So, but initially, we're starting out on somebody else's chain, and so far it's definitely helped us move faster. In terms of not having to, build that from scratch and sort of set that up from zero. But it's something that we plan to come back to, and there's definitely still, a very large part of the platform that needs to get built out on both sides. So, but
so much of it is wallet is really wallet dependent, and what kind of technologies allow people to sort of abstract the wallet away.
It's not so much us as it is the ecosystem around all of these things that really needs to I feel like mature a little bit more. That will also make it a lot easier for us to be able to support users wherever they are. So.
I mean, we're seeing the same kind of thing. This will be a controversial piece, but with the RevoFi people, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that project, but they'd done like a Wi-Fi router. I talked to Justin Caswell a while ago. And they've had some serious problems with getting their hardware sorted out and the rest of it. And for a while, it looked like the project was a scam. And then he just released this thing that said like, hey, look, we've been in the background working. But this idea that like this whole ecosystem of everything interconnecting and working really well together it's not finished yet. Like it's still, everybody's trying to figure it out. And there's not one wallet that everybody uses. There's not like a perfect, or like an accepted normal wallet. Some people have got one thing, some people have got another. So it's got to be super challenging to be building on top of something, like that, where you're like, oh, the ground just shifted. We got to make some big changes.
Yeah, and it's no different than a lot of other things in the the tech world. I think there's just so much more like attention and I don't know, but anger, like things at stake before there are usually like lots of things at stake in the Web3 space, where like people are entrusting hundreds of millions of dollars to like untested new software, and so in our case, like in our case, like we know we have something today for wallet integration that's suboptimal from a user experience perspective, but it works, and we see a very clear path towards getting like more abstraction or at least other tools on top of the wallet, so you can generate it in the, like, one thing we chose not to do early on was generate the wallet in the app for the user. We allowed them to bring their own wallet initially, but like eventually we will support the much smoother onboarding experience of generating the wallet in the app and like basically keeping it in the background until the user says, okay, I actually want to put something on chain now, which in our case is minting the vehicle ID. And that's what sets you up to get rewards and access apps. And like, there's a lot of stuff that kind of flows downstream from that, but we can create this very smooth process in the future that the next versions of our app will move us towards, where somebody signs up and they don't have to know what a blockchain is. They don't have to know about a wallet. Like, it's just, they add their car, like that's enough. You get started, you can see some real benefit to using this product. And then you're like, oh, okay, like I get this point. I have this ID for my car. Like they sit in this wallet, like there's keys for these things. Like, you know, it's easy to kind of like make that nice transition for users over time. And today it's just sort of like a blunt object at the beginning that they get hit with, where it's like, go download MetaMask and like Rainbow Wallet, or like figure out what this whole world is. And like certain people know about that, so it's okay. But you know, it'll only get better.
Let me ask you this: is I'm seeing in the comments a couple people saying, "Hey, have you tried this network or have you considered that network?" And I'm going to throw out an answer and then tell me if I'm wrong. I'll tell a story. There's a guy in my neighborhood who's got a giant macaw parrot, and he walks around with this parrot, and there's no leash on it. Like, it just sits on his shoulder and walks around. And there's people in the neighborhood are always asking, like, hey, do you know that guy with a parrot? And one of the common questions that I hear about him is like, hey, do you think he knows that parrots live 70 years? And it's going to outlive him and the rest of that. And I think the dude's walking around with a multi-$1,000 parrot on his shoulder. He probably knows more about parrots than anyone asking him. And I think the same thing is probably true for you guys, is that I'm guessing, and this is where I'm wondering if I'm wrong, like, you've probably considered a lot of different options and settled on the option that seems best to you. Is it possible that you only considered one option and you went with that one?
It's always possible, but
Not
I
probable.
guess it depends on how far away the day is when we move to another chain. But the reason we picked it was specifically around the language and the tooling around the language, right? So you really have two options in the blockchain space, which is if you're using a chain that can support smart contracts, it's either Rust or it's Solidity. We picked Solidity. We will probably have to come back to the Rust side no matter what, because Solana is an extremely promising project. But
right,
using Solidity means we can almost move to any chain. Let's say 7 out of 10, and that's a pretty good start.
Yeah. Okay.
I thought that because someone gave you a sticker, Polygon, and decided to, that's worth it.
Oh, there are those little motivators.
Yeah. It's always interesting to see these things where people are like, oh, have you considered this or consider that? And I think, man, with the Helium team, I mean, they've been working on it since 2013, and it's gone through, as Andy said, it has not been a straight line by a long shot to get where they are. I think the same thing's going to happen with Hotspotty, and the same thing's happening with DIMO. I mean, the same thing's happening with Gristle King. Where we started with, or what I started with consulting, is really different now. It's never a straight line to success. And so the interesting piece is to kind of figure out, like, what's the most likely thing to happen and not what is the guarantee. And I think a lot of folks are looking for a guarantee and are not comfortable with a likely thing. Andy, I see it shaking around. What do you got, Todd?
The different way to like frame it, at least as far as how we think about it, is like, what's not going to change in the future. So, there's people are going to want cheaper transactions. They're going to want it to work faster. They're going to want it to be decentralized, at least reasonably so in some cases. Like, there's certainly projects that test the limits of that in both directions. And those are the things that you just have to keep an eye on. And these projects have momentum. They have developer activity around them that if you're involved in the space, you can, sort of like put your finger up in the wind and detect how it's going. You can vibe check it. And if there's enough positive signals about something, then ultimately it leads to a decision and like an investment of time and resources in building on something. But of course, you never want to set a project like DIMO or Hotspotty or Helium up in a position where you're just like solely dependent on one thing, because then it's just bad in the long run. And anybody who says that they're like dogmatic or like religious about one blockchain technology versus another is like probably missing the point when it comes down to it. So
Well,
Yeah.
I know, 100% agree with what you said.
Sorry.
And that's one reason why, like, we at Hotspot, we're planning to add multiple chains. Now, we're not a blockchain project, but we want to be the centerpiece of the blockchain on DY, especially. Like, imagine if you could just easily manage your DY fleet, or sorry, your DIMO fleet on Hotspot, and then easily
Block Explorer for
swap.
the real world. That's what we. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that's where we're gonna get pretty soon. Be able to integrate with a lot of different projects and make a better world like that, right?
Are you going to stay with the Hotspotty brand name, or are you going to change that, or what are you thinking there? This is kind of like a total Hotspotty question.
I think we're gonna stick with Hotspotty. I think it's a good name. I quite like it as well, and we have a very simple logo.
Pretty soon be able to integrate with a lot of different projects.
And you can hear my voice.
Yeah, there's a little bit of an echo. I just finally got Paul in, and I'm figuring out my software here. Yeah, like,
one thing. One thing that I can say that we've been.
Let's try it again. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. One thing that I've been spending some time in the past few weeks is playing a lot with maps, map tile servers, and trying to do really, really cool map visualization. And because we know that like the DY space all and then geolocation. So we're trying to find better ways to improve the way that people can visualize and understand the information. Basically, the education perspective of that we have with Helium to be able to add to all the different projects. So we spend a lot of time trying to get really cool visualization, and I'm really excited to show that to you guys like pretty soon.
Shit, yeah, love it. And now we got
Paul.
another tech geek on here. Is Paul? Welcome, dog.
Hey, hello.
We got you in.
Sorry for being trouble to attend, and sorry for the echo. I was surprised.
No, you're good. It's all me, like trying to figure this out. I'm trying to be a media mogul and listen at the same time and screwing everything up. So, Paul, as you've got this kind of deep LoRaWAN tech side, is walk me through what you're thinking with HIP 70, and if you've heard anything about the DIMO stuff, I don't know, any comments on that? I think it's really interesting to get your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have a lot of element on DIMO, so I won't talk about it.
Sure.
And I was listening with only a year during the beginning of the discussion.
Yeah.
But HIP 70, yeah, I did not have time to read all the details yet, but I can talk a bit about what was more interesting me around the console evolution and the arrival of ShipStack. And that's a revolution. and personally, I mean, as I maintain one public console, it has have a big impact on all what I've done. But there is a big interest in this. I mean, we don't have a lot of LoRa network server implementation around the world, and if 5 years ago it was a simple piece of code, somehow now it's something really complex. And LoRa Alliance, they are really strong in adding complexity in the protocol release after release. I'm not sure that more than 1% of the device are including the two last releases they have made, because they are really productive in adding stuff. But it means that the LoRa network server have to implement this, and it's really hard, I think, for a team like Helium to follow this, and it's a risk for the community that is using Helium to have later on a console that run LoRaWAN network server that is obsolete compared to the norm and compared to the new device arriving. So basing this on a standard component that is really state of the art and up to date related to the norms as ShipStack is a good solution for that. It is a security for people implementing LoRaWAN, and so that's quite good in that way.
Yeah.
The less positive thing in point of view is the new architecture is really less decentralized. So it's really more centralized. All the data, all the hotspots are reaching through an API a load balancer, which is currently managed by Helium or Nova or Foundation, but by one person. And so it means that all the decentralization we had through the state channel and all that stuff for processing the data exchange between the hotspot and the router is put on the side. I had this discussion with Nova team, and maybe they will make some evolution to have more decentralization later. But it's reducing this and means that the data is passing through this single point of failure or single point of observation. I don't know to say that, and that's the only negative point I see around this. But it's interesting to consider.
Yeah. And I think, Yev, you were talking a little bit about this, but I'd love to hear more on what are the concerns you have with HIP 70 and going over to this. It's going to start off with one Oracle. Yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah. So I'm going to be making a lot of assumptions here about what the implementation is going to look like. So that's the preface to all of this, right? But single Oracle is once again dependent on who's running that Oracle, right? You can have 1,000 nodes that if they're not up, won't be a very reliable network, especially if it's they can't come to a consensus. Having one Oracle in one data center certainly has its problems. You're just going to switch from one failure mode to another. But we, as software engineers, have figured out how to scale the centralized infrastructure pretty well at this point. So in terms of being able to replicate instances and make it available across failure domains. That being said, in the long term, I still agree, like you need more than one hosting company, and ideally it's maybe not as many as there are validators today, but still quite a few, and more regional, closer to the places where the data is actually being, the proofs are getting sent from, where the data is actually being consumed, which is to some extent not a new model. At least I'll speak to what I know, which is United States, the United States cellular network was pretty much built in a very sharded manner. It was built very regionally, and some of that was by accident, just because the state of things at the time, and now it's become more central, a little bit more centralized even on the enterprise side. But it's certainly not new to do something like that.
What are the big kind of legitimate concerns about HIP 70 from your guys' perspective as probably going to be one of the bigger users of the network? If the success matches up to the dreams, which I hope it does, what are some of the concerns you have looking at this and saying, shit, this is a different direction and it affects us in this way?
Maybe I can talk a little bit.
Yeah.
So the way that the ETL of the Helium, the blockchain is doing right now, it's very decentralized, and it's really good. But there's way too many things stored on chain, which it was very interesting at the beginning. Like you have everything in the blockchain, right? All the witnesses, all the proof of coverage information is there. It on an ideal world, that's amazing. The same thing as in an ideal world, each hotspot have a copy of the entire blockchain, right? That's how Helium started, and they realized that wasn't sustainable. Right now, the blockchain, it's like, depending on what you do, it's like between 4 and 6 terabytes of data, and it's growing gigabytes per day. And then imagine every data that you're trying to process, you need to look information on that. So imagine like the amount of data that we have on Hotspot, like we're processing like terabytes and terabytes of data every day. Just going back to the first guide that I wrote about how to run a ETL node, I said like, you just get like a 0.5 terabyte disk and you should be fine. Right now you have to get like multiple disks and then configure them as being only one. So it was beautiful, but to the point that it's not scalable, right? So I think Helium it's doing the right way, but the downside it's reducing a little bit of the decentralization is going to increase with like Helium. Okay, they have they own that information is going to be stored on like an Amazon bucket, for example. Initially, it's going to have a centralized oracle, but then they need to figure out ways to have multiple oracles that are not run by Nova Labs or for Helium Foundation. But they need to be like trusted parties to increase that. And but I think it's a thing that needs to be done, and hopefully it's going to keep on improving and keep on cleaning and being more decentralized in the future. But it's like I said, it's not a straight line, right? You make it super decentralized, realize it's not scalable. You need to reduce a little bit this decentralization for the next steps, and then you keep on iterating from there. I think overall it's going to be pretty good. Just hope that the Nova Labs actually gives the information and early enough to people that are building on top of the network before doing the hard switch, let's say.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm, if I can react, I mean, I mostly agree with you, but on some point, not exactly. Well, for example, I mean, yeah, also managing ETL, and it's a mess, but it's fun to manage a PostgreSQL database, which is now about 9 terabyte or something like this, and growing every day. But yeah, that point is a bit a mess, and but it can be optimized. I mean, currently, this is a good example with a single database, which is really big, and it could be a distributed database like a MongoDB or thing like this. We can scale horizontally and vertically to manage this. And you're true that I mean, just a consequence of the lots of data we have on chain, and as Helium is the largest blockchain ever, it has an impact. I mean, it's really hard to make it running every day, every time, and so on. And it's really a challenge that I mean, they succeed. Even if we had some trouble, I think I mean the team that is managing this is really strong. It's super complex, and they did well. But if we remove everything, it means that we won't have any KPI or any data. And let's see at all what we get from this data and from the detailed analysis in terms of discovering the problems, identifying the gamers, understanding the problem you have on your hardware, compare your performance of your antenna, your setup, not especially with the user, but just making sure that your setup is correctly working, and it's also a feature. So maybe it's good to simplify this, the depth of this, because it can become too much complex with different DAO and so on. But we also have to make sure that this data will still be there and be exploitable, and we will be able to continue to trust the data that will be presented. As an example, currently, I can see what happened on the network in terms of quantity and measure if the IoT network is growing or not growing, and what are all the stats I've made, for example, on the different routers. If tomorrow I need to investigate blobs on an S3 storage where there is just a hash of packets, it's just going to be a mess, and I won't be able to do this level of investigation and understanding of
Sure.
the network. And yeah,
How does that? So, Yev, how does or Andy, how does that impact you guys? Is that you can't see as much data on the Helium network, or do you not care? It makes no impact on you at all. These kinds of changes.
I would say if it goes the way I think it's going to go, it shouldn't have impact any consumers, right? At least on the cell network side. So for us, as somebody who wants to use it to send data or to validate our own location for our own proof of movement, I don't think there'll be too much of a change. I do think there'll be some changes for hotspotting for sure on the ETL side for that. But I'm hoping, and I'm sure for all the existing customers of Helium already, obviously minimal disruption.
Specific DIMO stuff, and I'm really curious about like what are you super stoked about that's kind of new and coming down the pipe, and then B, is there anything that you've learned that you didn't expect to learn from kind of growing it this far? Like, have there been these surprising things you're like, shit, I didn't see that coming, or I didn't see that being valuable, but all of a sudden it is. So either one of those.
Well, I'll answer those in reverse order.
Sure.
We thought we needed 100,000 people to have like a meaningful enough user base to really test out and get this thing ready for scale of like tens of millions of vehicles. And what we learned was actually at about 2,000 connected vehicles, which we're well past now. That was really like, that's enough connected cars to really start to do some interesting experiments and learn a lot more about what users actually want, and also what the data is really when you aggregate it at that level. We have over 400 different makes and models of vehicles now sending data to the platform, and we understand we've gone through like some of the early growing pains around having outages, and like approach some of the scaling like with a really sort of long-term focus. And I mean, the biggest learnings we're starting to get now out of like even just bringing users third-party applications or services that they can actually take their data that they have in DIMO and make it useful and more valuable to them. And one of the coolest things that we're starting to see is as we're pulling in third-party data sources like valuation for vehicles. So based on the data you have about this vehicle, make a more educated guess about what you think it's worth, and then potentially have people set up to be able to offer you either like refinancing your car or offering to buy it from you without necessarily even knowing who you are, just getting like a profile of your car basically. Nice. And so that's like one of the use cases that has really started to take off in the last couple of weeks, where we're like, okay, like there's something here. People definitely want data to be able to value cars. Like that is really obvious. I mean, the used car market in the US is 3 times bigger than the new car market. And so it's absolutely massive. And any kind of informational edge that you can have in it as a buyer of cars is really valuable. And as a user, historically, people have been really screwed over in these transactions where if you show up to a car dealer and you don't have like, complete history of the maintenance of your vehicle, or, you're trying to get a trade-in for your car, like you're going to get a worse deal. Yeah. And it's just because they don't have as much information about what you've done with that vehicle. And that's, doubly true for electric vehicles, especially, given the state of that technology today and how new it is really to car dealers. Yeah. So like
God.
that's
There's like a million awesome things in there.
That's one category. Yeah, Nick, look, like if you so that's going to give people a reason to add their cars when they're not even connected, right? And then it'll say, oh, if you do connect, then you'll be able to increase the value of your car theoretically because you show up to these transactions at least with some more data than you otherwise would have. And so that's like the kind of feature that we uncovered just exploring the idea space, and are going to now like build out some cool stuff for.
Super. I mean, okay, so there's actually one thing that we at least I skimmed over, where one of you guys said proof of movement, and I was like, oh yeah, totally. And I was like, wait a second, hold on a goddamn minute here. Anything that has proof of is something that's like new and big and usually pretty beautiful. And it sounds like you guys have been exploring that way more than when we first talked.
Yeah. So one of the things here is that all the data deep inside the DIMO network is like verifiably correct, right? And everything that if you were to use this to value your car higher, we can prove this is real data. Somebody didn't generate it. Obviously it's heavily inspired by Helium and proof of coverage. In our case, it's slightly different because we want to make sure that things are moving as opposed to existing in the same location for a long time. But essentially, it's leveraging other things in the real world, such as the cell tower. So obviously, we have the connection over 4G. We're adding the Helium connection, which will allow us to map where the vehicle kind of verify the vehicle is where it says it is based on whether it sees certain Helium hotspots. And in the future, as we get into density, it starts to actually look a little bit more like proof of coverage, where the cars can validate each other as they drive by and say, hey, I saw this car here, right? And you can start to build trust chains in the real world the same way that Helium has with cellular signals, or LoRa signals.
Amazing. And is that something you guys are going to host all of that kind of internally, or are you going to use something like Hotspotty, or are you going to hire someone like Paul to run some of that stuff for you? How are you thinking through that?
So currently, it reads a little bit like HIP 50 is what I'll say. So, we've been doing this for about 10 months. So everything is probably quite, well, being very honest, like still running on a centralized server run by us, right? That being said, we have the same kind of roadmap that HIP 70 laid out, which is allow someone else to host it. So we will really want to split apart the open source code away from who's hosting and running the data and who's responsible for it in the long term, so that you can have many hosts who are providing essentially the Rust endpoints, or the Web 2 APIs, the Oracle, whatever words you want to use. But yeah, Hotspot is actually one of the companies we've already brainstormed with that on.
Very cool. Very cool.
Thank
Yeah,
you. And,
good.
The first Europe node.
Okay.
well, to add a comment, but I mean, now I know what you're doing. And yeah, that's really interesting. I work in that area a couple of years ago for a big tire manufacturer, and I mean, the driving the data is really valuable. There is a lot of different direction where you can do this. And the main problem you have is to be able to scale. What I mean is to get a fleet which is a large fleet, because you need to convince people to put something in their car or a smartphone, but smartphone is not quality enough to get something in car usually. And I'm sure since many years now that the crypto approach is really a good way to accelerate this deployment and obtain the critical quantity of data for accessing the most valuable use case. So that's quite really interesting what you do, guys, for sure.
Yeah, it's fast.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm hearing that you've got all these business cases. Like, you got all the data that people can sell, and I'm assuming you get some piece of that. And then you've got this like car value thing where people like Big Dave Akers, who just drives their car like a savage, they can no longer get away with it, and you're helping people not get rocked.
Well,
by
look,
it.
you don't have to provide the data if you don't want. That's a big thing. That's a very important thing. So, like, people are being sold cars these days that have existing internet connections from the OEM, and you don't have a choice whether you provide that data or not. Your choice is either you're in or you're out.
Yep.
And with DIMO, at least, it's your data, so you can decide if you want to provide it to somebody else for some use case. That's up to you. And there's some things where you can just opt in as like a blanket, like, maximize the use of my data, and like, I don't really care that much about my car's privacy.
Yep.
And do whatever you can with it. And some people will choose that, and other people will say, I want to have everything myself, and I'll opt in to some services if there's a very clear value exchange. Like,
Yep.
I give you this, you give me this, and they'll be both supported. And that's kind of the way it should be. We don't like this world in which people are being sold this expensive machine and saying, your only choice is to use this internet connection we've pre-installed in it, and that's all or nothing. Like, we get everything or you get nothing.
Yeah. I mean, so then there's another piece, is maybe someone like a regular person is going to be able to look at their own data and learn something about their car that they wouldn't have otherwise known, that's going to be valuable to them. What are some of the, Daniel, I see you kind of nodding your head there, like where do you guys see that having this extra data, I mean, maybe drives a better decision for someone, if at all? Because you guys do this all the time, right? Like, you got like 900 devices on your car.
The electric grid is one of the most interesting ones as far as people charging their car goes, I think. And that's something that requires a little bit more scale. But a grid operator could incentivize people to charge at specific times. And also, a lot of people don't know that charging in the middle of the day, if you have an EV, is like a lot worse. It depends where you are, of course, but based on the energy mix, if there's not a lot of solar on your grid, or they use natural gas peaking plants, like, you can generate like 3 times as much carbon emissions charging at one time of the day versus the other.
Yep.
And so that's like a very simple app that somebody could create on DIMO and look at somebody's charging patterns and say, I don't even need to like know anything else about your car other than like roughly where you are and when you charge, and I'll give you a readout on how much your carbon emissions are and how you could improve that, and maybe even incentive if the utility wants to support that.
Interesting. I mean, that's super cool. So as a little tease, there's a group coming to the Gristle crew in the next 2 weeks that's talking about doing something kind of specifically like this, where they're helping the grid in general become more efficient and charge at the right times. But I mean, the EVs are a giant part of that. I've got my little Volkswagen e-Golf, and if I charge that thing in the middle of the day, it's a huge cost. If I think we turn on charging at midnight and it goes to 6 a.m., it's like a fifth of the cost, or some ridiculously drop down amount. So that's
smart grid. Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, there's like so many cool things you can do with more information about your car. Is there anything else that you guys are seeing that is interesting that popped up that you hadn't seen kind of coming down the pipe that you're learning unexpectedly?
What we've discovered through a little bit of like just looking around is a realization that if you're trying to purchase a vehicle, there is really no data-driven place for you to go to actually compare the performance of these cars in the real world. At best, you will get an expert's opinion who was flown out to a city and given a car for 3 days and a lunch to write the said review.
Oh,
So I think it's, it would be very interesting to turn JD Power into a site that's driven by data from the car that says, this car says, 24 mpg average, and the fleet says actually it's 20, right? And there's could be a lot of reasons for that, and I think in the end it will help drive better decision making for
totally.
somebody who's buying a car than what exists today. But it's not something we were like fully intended. It was just like, oh yeah, this is like kind of obvious actually looking back on it.
Yeah, but it totally makes sense. That's super cool because I've always, when I read like car reviews when I'm looking to buy a car, which is once every 15 years, and the last time I did it was with my probably Toyota truck, maybe with the Volkswagen. I always imagine like, this is terrible, some fat overweight dude who's like a total motorhead, like sliding his ass into the car, and the car like shifts down, then he drives it around a track a couple times and writes something, and it's probably true for him, but it may not reflect what I'm going to do, which is, drive cookies around
actually
San Diego.
Use the car and rely on it in your day-to-day life.
Yeah. I'm going to get hammered for that a little bit, but yeah, that is super, super cool to think about this application of real world data, and that is really like more trustworthy than what an expert is saying. Like it's kind of like Moneyball applied to cars.
Yeah.
And this is people do this already. This is a whole huge industry, as you might imagine, but nobody does it in a very open way.
Right.
And I think that's the big contribution that we can make to it, is allowing a more fair like marketplace for ideas to develop. And so like what Yev just mentioned, the core team, we're working on supporting some of those use cases, but ultimately the way the project is set up, like anybody can come in and, get a license to build an app like that on top of DIMO. And we've published a bunch of stuff that kind of details how that will work. And we're working with some teams, some people y'all might know very, very familiarly based on this call, to enable some of those things to happen in the real world. So it's not just like an idea on a whiteboard, this is really going to happen.
Yeah.
Everybody's at the same time.
Yeah, I was just gonna add to what Andy said. It all really comes down to letting the user collect their own data and giving them the ability to share with who they want. So all these use cases are possible, but no one's built them just because you have to ask the manufacturer to do it. And I think that's simple. It's such a small and obvious change, but putting the user in control of what applications and who they share their data with, and making it clear that it's not going to be used for anything besides what they're agreeing to, is like gonna completely transform, I think, a lot of issues that we've had around device ownership, mobility, smart grid. All of these things are to some extent coming together, and it's probably the right time for us to address them in a better way than we have in the past.
Totally. Daniel, what were you gonna say?
I'm just gonna say that like the first time I heard about DIMO, I had the similar light bulb moment that I had with Helium in a different market,
Yeah.
Like, wow, this is going to be really cool. But yeah, I'm super excited by it. I know the DIMO is still early. There's a lot of work ahead, but I want to be part of it with Hotspotty and as a user as well, and just see where it goes. Because I think it's super exciting. It gives me the goosebumps to see all the possibilities that come with allowing this thing. That all the data of the cars are like the manufacturers don't want to share this information, right? It's private. Some things are not good. They don't want people to know. Mm-hmm. And now this can be available. And then people who want to buy cars, not just the car history, but like the whole car infrastructure, the whole car universe, the car market, it's going to be easier for you to define what car you want based on some personal information, some personal data, like your preferences. You can easily have something like, okay, this is the best car for you. In a much better way, and I mean, there's like so many different use cases. It's ridiculous.
It's nonstop. Hey, what's going on with DIMO hardware? I want to say I ordered one of those things. I don't know when, and I expect all this stuff to like take way longer than like Amazon. Are you guys shipping hardware? You must be.
Last update, and then I got to run.
Okay.
I didn't realize we were already so far over.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, it's all good, man. It's been a great conversation. So we just posted an update on Twitter yesterday, and we were hoping to have it be like we nailed it. We hit the goal for this month, but I think as of today, we're going to have hit our goal for last month. So we're only 2 days behind at this point, which is great. And we have some really good plans to ship as many and more in September. And we're already starting to see tons of people pour into the Discord and like all excited. They got their unit hooked up, and so things are going really well when it comes to the hardware. But of course, it's like such a crazy world out here building stuff, and we're doing a lot when it comes to making sure that we have enough of these to put in everybody's hands, and then more to come behind it. So yeah, we're hoping to be able to announce the date that we're going to reopen the store to take some more orders. And of course, like the main priority up until that point is going to be, we really want to have all of the supply in hand and tested to fulfill all of the pre-orders, which we're very close to being able to like check that box. And so, yeah, it's coming along really nicely, and we're going to keep everybody updated on Twitter. And yeah.
Okay. Super, super exciting. I saw. So you, Andy, if you got to bail, go ahead and bail. Thank you guys.
Somebody was saying that we need
cool
to make the device smaller, so that's why we're messing around with these guys here. It's it could get down to that big. There could be even some other installation positions. Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, it's no longer going to be up to the core team. We're really, working up quite a bit also on providing a reference spec for next generation hardware, and then there's 2 device OEMs that want to integrate in existing devices, some slightly smaller, some similar form factors, some new stuff that might get thrown in there. And so, yeah, this fall is going to be like obviously a lot more building, and I'm sure some of our plans will change here and there, but we're on a really good trajectory when it comes to being able to deliver a shitload of hardware next year.
It's super cool, and I think Helium kind of unwittingly set the stage for like, yeah, your hardware is not going to be there tomorrow. It's going to take sometimes.
Well, we'd like to get to that point. Yeah, it's
totally.
not exactly what we're trying to. I think. Well, yeah, there's a whole bunch of reasons for that, I'm sure, but we're certainly taking a slightly more informed approach based on what Helium experienced and what we experienced with our own presale, where we thought we'd be able to deliver some of these units. Like we had to push some delivery dates back 6 months, which was horrible.
Yeah.
And so we're getting really close to the point where we feel like we have our arms like fully wrapped around this thing, and then we're going to pick it up and start running with it. So that's yeah.
Super psyched. And then I saw someone said you guys should partner with HiveMapper. If I remember, you guys have at least talked and you know each other. I don't know if you've talked to people.
Oh yeah, totally. I love those guys, and we're certainly going to experiment with some of their hardware units. I think we're hoping to put a demo together sometime like in the next month or so, where we have one of their units in a car that has a bunch of other DIMO equipment and connected vehicle stuff that we're testing out. And yeah, they're building some cool stuff, and we're excited to add more capabilities around the DIMO hardware.
Yeah, super rad stuff. All right, fellas, thanks a ton for coming on.
Later,
stay as long as you want. I think we're going to talk about Hip 70 stuff next, but appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, late. Cool. So it should be just a couple of us left. So, Paul, what do I need to do to run a Chirp stack server? It sounds like I can put it on a Raspberry Pi, connect it into a router, and then change at least one of my Helium hotspots over to a Chirp stack gateway, and then put a device on. Like, is it as easy as that, or is it going to be really difficult? Like, what's this Chirp stack business about?
I'll to exactly tell you right now, but what I understand is you should not do anything in your hotspot. Okay, it should go through a future release, and and Helium will drive the traffic from the hotspot to the central load balancing and router architecture of Nova, and this central architecture will route to the right chip's arc instance. Okay, so basically it's like you have a single router, in fact, but each route based on the same rules as you have previously on the network. So based on the dev address, it will route it to the OUI, and your OUI will be an integration between your chip stack and the central piece. So what you will have to do is to deploy your chip stack. I don't know exactly what does that mean, but in my point of view, you don't do that on a Raspberry Pi. You do that on a standard server. Okay,
Okay.
which looks really better, and so you get your gathering. But what I understand is you still need your UI, you still need your dev address. So you still have this initial cost, which is not high, but means that if you just want to play 5 minutes with this, it's not, it has not been done for that.
Yeah, I'm super excited to dive into it and see what we can do. Let's see. I think Neil may be coming in a sec. I know I've
Nice.
seen a couple folks in the chat as we get back to Helium stuff. One thing I wanted to put out is in the description of this video there should be a date, a time, and a place for the HeliumHouse pre-funk run by CryptoBossLite in New York. So if you're going to HeliumHouse in New York the day before, CryptoBossLite has figured out this place that we're all going to meet up, McKenna's Pub, 5 o'clock in the PM East Coast time, and hang out and meet each other. So if you're into that, come on in. Here comes Neil.
One fun fact: the Chirp stack still is being developed in Portugal, not by a
Ooh.
Portuguese person, but in the south of Portugal.
Okay, right on. Neil, what's going on, dog? Let me see
Come
if
on.
I can change you.
How's it going?
To Neil.
Yeah.
What?
Chirp stack talk, eh?
Oh, you are doing
Yeah. Let me see. Neil at TrackPack is. Let me put you down as that.
Yeah,
Take
yeah,
a
but
second to
DIMO.
get there. Yeah. There we go.
So if
Cool,
you
so-
had the whole chirp stacks talk, sorry, I've been coding away. So
No, I bet you have. So, I mean, Neil, you're another user. We just talked to DIMO for a while. What does the HIP 70 stuff mean for you as far as running TrackPack? Is it going to be a giant change? Is it going to be something you're not sure of yet? Like what's coming on the pipe? Are you happy about it? Are you like, whoa, I don't like this at all? Where are you?
overall, it's good. We're finally going to get full spec LoRaWAN. You know, Helium's been playing catch up with that for ages, and they've kind of done their own implementation of it, but it's not fully up to spec. So having that's going to be fantastic. What worries me a bit is, like, although there's not a lot of traffic on the network at the moment, all of that traffic is going to have to set up into a new LNS, and that LNS is going to be is going to have a charge to it, right? So, you know, you're going to have load balance servers. Regional servers is another one as well. You know, if you're targeting certain regions, you're going to need a presence there. And Helium is no longer going to be running the foundation console. Helium is no longer going to be running the dedicated console they have. So there's no easy route for users to sign up unless a provider steps up, like I'm assuming Paul's probably going to do. But that service is expensive.
Yeah.
Talking to Capcom earlier, he's 100% for the idea that the LNS providers get paid for this service. So I think that's a really interesting thing that can follow on afterwards, because they are the people that are going to be driving usage. I think with a lot of what's in use for LoRaWAN at the moment, it's fixed site data, right? So they're just not going to move to Helium. Why on earth would you do that? You know, you've got SLAs in place, you're running the gateways, you can provide that kind of service. But it's these new markets that need the backing the most, you know. People like me who don't need... I understand Helium are putting quite a lot of cost on this, but we didn't need the complexity when we were starting to branch into it. And they're kind of expecting us to do that. That's my worry about it.
Yeah. Paul, what do you got?
The idea of having a LNS per solution provider is, I mean, it's a nonsense in my point of view. If you have 10,000 devices fleets or 100,000 devices fleets, maybe it's relevant. But when you start and have 100 or 1,000 of device, it's really better to simplify your life and go to a public LNS. That's my point of view.
To a what
Don't
LNS?
cost
Sorry.
I mean, a public LoRa network server like
Public
the
one.
Helium one, like my one, like yeah. I mean, it's like for your electricity. I mean, If you are a big industrial company, maybe it's interesting for you to produce your own energy. Why not? If you're really big, but it really just not make sense for 99% of the industries, companies, and people. You go to the public service, you buy electricity, and you get it, and you don't care about the nuclear stuff. You know?
Yeah.
So it's
Mm.
the same thing for networks, basically. And so yeah, it's a good question. Is maybe we had a really clear integration with the previous console and the network. So, for example, for the billing in DCs and so on, it was quite easy, and that's a big challenge, I think, with ShipStack. So I hope that they will facilitate also this integration. Otherwise, it will create a certain complexity. What I mean is. On ShipStack, it's made that you have the data passing through ShipStack going to the device, but if I'm a public operator, I need to invoice you for this. And the invoice depend on something that is computed on the blockchain. I mean, on the network server. And so, do I get the right KPIs for doing this? Can I automate this? Is it included? Do I have software to develop? There are lots of questions for me around this piece of things, as also around the migration of the existing fleet to the old system to the new system. You need to have both running in parallel. Otherwise, I can say to a fleet of 100 of different people, okay, we're gonna change the system on tomorrow midnight, and you'll have to reconfigure all your integration, all your setups, because it will work differently in the new system. So there is lots and lot of question around this. And what I mean, in my point of view, and basically I react on what you say, Niels, because it can be a big pitfall for Helium network, or it can be a big success. I mean, long term it can be a big success, but if we fail in the migration of this, if we fail on the user experience during this change, people will, I mean, maybe stop deploying in Helium, waiting a long time before doing this, and really slow down the growth of the use of the network.
Yeah.
And I mean, we all know that the growth of the network, growth of the usage is, I mean, center of value for what we are all doing. So that's really tricky for this.
It is interesting. So we don't have to slow the growth of the network, but certainly have to manage it better. I'm seeing throughout this show, I've seen in the comments, really kind of comments from folks who are scared, who are being affected by FUD, by the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, because they don't understand the complexity of it, and they got into it for reasons that seem good to them, but are not actually good reasons. And so part of it is explaining what we're doing, and part of it is just there's a giant unknown coming down the pipe that we all got to figure out how to use.
Do you need to reconfigure, that my question? You have to reconfigure the sensors, right, to use the new servers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
The main problem is they're going to have to rejoin. So if you've got a really dumb sensor that just doesn't detect anything, then it won't rejoin. So you'd have to go and visit it. So if you've got installations all over the world on solar and wind, then you're going to have get a lot of flights to go deal with that. But like some devices, like the Oysters, if they haven't had a downlink in 7 days, they auto rejoin. So that's going to be fine. But in theory, I'm going to lose 7 days worth of data. Or if they're both running in parallel, I can add it to the new one and turn it off, get it to reboot, and then it might rejoin on the new one. But not all sensors are like that at the moment.
Huh.
Yeah,
so it could be
that's really important. I mean, it's something really important. I mean, I'm developing devices, and I've already faced this kind of difficulty. We face it on the Sync network when migrating also to V2 to V3. And in fact, the difference between a device that is developed by a good team and device developed quickly for just something on the market. And normally when you develop a device for LoRaWAN, it's really important to manage this. So you can have a rejoin on every X day, but it's not a good techniques. Because when you rejoin, you never show that you will be able to join, particularly if you have a mobile device, because you can be out of network for getting a downlink, but still being on network for doing uplink. So that's sometimes a mess. And you have also, I mean, when you rejoin, you have some rule to respect, like doing a join on 0.1% of time, and after 24 hours, it's one per day. So it has a lot of impact. So you really need to think about this, like checking if you're still connected on regular time, but do not rejoin as soon as you see there is a problem. So, and it's quite complex, in fact, to manage. And the norms define certain things, but not define what happened really on the field. And so you have to invent things around this, and that's really complex for sure. But it's for, as you say, it's really impacting in the transition, because when you put some device on a critical process, uh, and you say, okay, we're gonna kill this existing session, and all your device will be disconnected, and now you have to wait a couple of days before getting data. It's a problem. If you are selling the service to a customer based on such situation, your customer will call you and insult you. So and so you need to be careful with that with devices. And sometimes there is some stupid thing, like just have the ability to request a device to on its own do a rejoin. So basically, you send a downlink to the device saying, I want to rejoin, and once you know that it had get it, you move it to the other platform. You can imagine to have something on your device, but you have to think about it previously. And so it means also that it's a good example of the complexity of the migration, because if you want to have a seamless migration, it means that the two systems need to be able to run in parallel. You need to be able to move all the configuration from a place to another, but you also need to be able one by one to activate or deactivate your device on one or the other solution, which is really complex to manage.
Yeah, there's just a lot of I've been talking to Capcom today, and it's been great. He was talking about how the fees for running an LNS are going to be insignificant compared to what they are now. So there's a lot more opportunity to do it, and it just makes sense that people can bring them up on Raspberry Pis. One major issue right now, as I've just found out with Digital Matter, with these Yabby edges, they can't send the downlinks fast enough because of the latency between the UK and America. So they only work really well in America because they're delivered to American routers. But now with the new system, I can put a load balanced cluster up, so wherever it is, it's not slow. Talking to some Australians the other day, they have major problems because it's so long to deliver it to the States. So, these changes coming are very much needed.
I know a good solution based in Europe, so you can solve your latency problem if you
and that too. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, if we zoom way out, one of the things Lee and I walk around the neighborhood at the end of the day, and she's asking me like, what's going to happen and what's going on with HIP 70, and is HIP 70 good, and is it a good indicator, and what's going to happen to the price of HNT? There's kind of a bunch of different answers there. One of the first is at 2 p.m. I'll be talking with Sean from Blockjoy about validators and staking and unstaking and that, because I'm seeing a lot of comments about that and questions about that. So we'll answer that more in depth there. But I think at the kind of zoom out big picture level is the folks driving these changes are really invested in the network. And it is very likely, and it's not certain, nothing's guaranteed, but it's very likely that they've not only thought this through enough, but are also competent enough to pull it off and make the network good in the long term. So when I see these, it's always like a new thing, and it's a change, and change is always disruptive, and disruptive is just a pain in the ass. But I don't see that anyone in the really big picture is saying like, hey, we're doing this to make the network worse, right? It's going to make it hard for a little while. And certainly, Neil, you might rack up some frequent flyer miles going around and changing out some sensors or connecting into them or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, we're going to end up with a network that is probably better than it is right now. And that's kind of the directional change that I'm seeing. Are you guys seeing anything different where you're like, no, this thing is categorically bad for the network?
This is why
my point of view. My point of view is that it's something that will be needed sometime.
We have to do
and
it.
better is to do it right now. I mean, even if it has an impact right now, it's better to have an impact where currently the network is not much used, and you can impact the device in production basically because there's not so much. This kind of modification, when you do it a long time after, can be really a killer. So it's really good to do that, and particularly before you get a crash, because what they try to do to avoid is that you have the network crash under the scale it rise. So it's I think it's impacting a lot. It's impacting us, but if we don't do it, we go in a wall, and better is to do it sooner. So sooner is now. So that's a good point.
100%. Daniel, anything to put on top of that? I see you nodding your head. Because you're going to have to deal with a lot of this.
Rip the Band-Aid. Yeah, man, don't remind me. We're already like playing the whole... It's going to be so much refactoring. It's not going to be fun. I mean, it depends on how the Nova or the foundation is going to let us get access to this data. I'm probably going to build a new database that's going to work as a ETL for us, right?
Okay.
So I think I'm going to hopefully I'll be able to get something going with the foundation to enable this, because there's just, otherwise we're going to break a lot of people who wants to build cool things on top of the data itself, not the token itself, because that's something that I think is really cool about the Solana. You can be able to like the DeFi stuff with AGNT, so that's exciting.
Yeah.
But the actual use of the network, the POC data, the thing that these guys are working on, those are the backbone of the protocol, the project, right? DeFi is just like a little like whipping cream on top. I would say.
But I think to your point, we don't want people like DIMO or like Neil to have more ass pain than is necessary, right? There's going to be a lot of it, but at least it sounds like right now that the thing to do is to fix it before it gets even worse.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
I mean, the way that Helium is doing now, it's almost like the way that Pollen is doing, right? Like Pollen has a centralized, all the data is centralized through an API, but then they're using Solana to the drops of the PCN tokens.
Yeah.
So I guess Helium's kind of like going to be the same in that way.
Yeah, which is super cool to see that Helium and Pollen are learning from each other, and that was, hopefully the message that came across from me and that I want to keep coming across is like, hey, these two networks are running kind of in parallel, doing slightly different things, doing a ton of overlapping competitive things, but because they both exist, they will both progress way faster because they have competition, and that's fantastic, right? And yeah, super cool. Okay, I think we're pretty close to wrapping it up. Is there anything else that you guys have on this call? I'm seeing some questions about IO5. Does anyone want to address it? I haven't paid attention to it other than to see it appears to be, I don't know, a little bit scammy, but I haven't paid attention to it.
It appears to be a scam, and from every outside perspective, it's a Ponzi scheme where they're taking in a licensing fee, and then you get returned Bitcoin for paying that license fee. So,
okay.
But the very protocol itself is not out there yet. There's no devices for it, so it's just the very definition of a Ponzi scheme.
Okay.
I can't say it isn't, but or isn't, but it looks like one.
Sure. Cool.
Well, one point I can add, nothing to add on IO5. I didn't take a look at it, and I went following your advice.
Sure.
One point is it's a reaction I had yesterday on Discord regarding to H70. It's I think that Helium, as many other crypto projects, should be take advantage of each other. What I mean, we are discussing about putting some stuff on S3 bucket on AWS for getting the information, but there are some crypto projects that work really well for storing data with a S3 compatible interface, like Storj, for example. And so I think that would be interesting in this big refactoring they are doing to also see if there's some interest to go to other decentralized Web3 projects to create really an ecosystem of of crypto project working close together. As you say, there's interesting thing between Pollen and Helium. That's great, really great to see that they are not considering themselves as a competitor. Right. And otherwise, all the crypto project will be stronger, going all together. And totally. Yeah, if I can recommend something to them is to have a look at this kind of solution instead of putting all the money we are putting on the blockchain to AWS. We love them, but
yeah,
not so much.
Dig it. Love it. All right, guys. Well, thank you a ton for coming on. Thanks for all the extra time. Daniel, you've been here the whole, 90 minutes. So rock and roll, dog. Love it. We'll see you guys. I'll see you guys 2 p.m. today if you want to do the validators and staking stuff. You're all welcome to that. I know that Sean is on there, but you guys can come in too if you like, and it's not too late. And if not, I will see the folks on this call at the next State of the Network, and we'll see how we've made progress on HIP 70. So thanks a ton, folks.
Thank you,
Have a good one. Love you guys. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.